Welcome back to Tasteland. I am your co-host, Francis Zierer.
And I'm Daisy Aliotto.
And today we are going to be talking to Edmond Lau, who you may know for his luxury memes, which frequently go viral on Twitter and then Instagram and more recently, LinkedIn. He is a cultural strategist, designer, and art director, and also former lawyer. We'll ask him about that. Working at the intersection of fashion, tech, and new media. If you've heard people talking about the dark mode shift recently, that's because of him. It is something he coined earlier this year in one of his memes.
I have been spending more time on LinkedIn recently, prospecting, and a lot of stuff I see on there I really just do not like. And it's nice to have Edmond's memes come on my feed and break up the slop.
Mm-hmm. You know what's interesting? His dark mode shift post, it did better on LinkedIn than on Twitter. On LinkedIn, it got just under 1,000 likes, plus whatever other engagement numbers. And on Twitter, it only got like 270.
Sign of the times.
Sign of the times.
Sign of the times. Do you spend a lot of time on LinkedIn?
I do. Which I'll talk about that for a second. I swore I would never make a LinkedIn when I was in college. I swore.
Well, that is what somebody at Lewis and Clark College would be telling themselves. Yes.
I was like, I will never make a LinkedIn. And then in 2018, when I had started doing some like freelance copywriting type of things, but I was still working in a kitchen, I was like, I have to make a LinkedIn. This is like, I have to make it now.
They got me, girls.
And yeah, exactly. And eventually LinkedIn was what got me my first full-time job in the career I now have. So I have to give it, I hate to say it, but I have to give it to LinkedIn. And I really got hoodwinked in at my last job, where I spent a lot of time ghostwriting for my CEO and in his LinkedIn account, and like prospecting, trying to get people to like book meetings with him in his LinkedIn. And unfortunately, I have never been the same.
I mean, there's a lot of startups now that they use AI to help you connect with somebody in a way that seems really organic. So first they'll start following that person, and then they'll like from your account something that they posted, and then like maybe even comment. So by the time that you like actually message them with what you want, they think that they know you kind of. And I'm like, no, like I will literally, to me, that's like shadier. And also at this point, I can sort of tell if somebody's using a service that does that. So I will just straight up like request somebody, no note.
Block?
No note.
Oh yeah, no.
No,
I never do a note unless
no note. And then I either immediately or forget about it for 2 weeks. And then I just DM them and I just tell them like, this is what I want.
That's
or like, can we do a call? Because they'll kind of like slow, like ramp up of like, look at me, I'm engaging with you. I'm like warming you up. To me, it's like even weirder. It's like,
it's too
you don't know
see-through.
Me. You know that I'm connecting with you because I want something. Like, let's just cut to it. People do the same thing to me. Yeah. But I also accept every request, and I'm like, why do I keep doing this? I know these people are going to try to sell me something.
I used to, but I don't now. It is unfortunately the social media place where I have the biggest following.
That's really embarrassing for you.
It is. Sorry. Look, here's the thing. I've owned it. I could be much better at LinkedIn. I think my best performing LinkedIn post ever was when I was hiring for assistant editor 2 months ago or so, whenever I posted that. And I think it got like 250. I don't know. Anyways,
I get embarrassed to post.
I used to. And this is the thing. And this is maybe me selling out to like somebody who cares about their career, which I think when I was at Lewis and Clark College,
I famously don't care about my career.
See, when I was at liberal arts college, I was like, I don't want to care about my career. And maybe I shouldn't say that on this podcast. Maybe I shouldn't say that live. Now I do care about my work, and I like want to do work I like, and like I want it to be good, whatever. But at that time, I was like, I had no idea what I wanted to do, and now I still don't.
I think the problem is I peaked when I was profiled in the New York Times and posted on LinkedIn and just said my company was profiled in the New York Times. And I'm just like, what else is there to say?
Well, there's the next profile.
There is always the next profile.
We should talk very briefly about the notes reading, because that was 4 or 5 days ago now.
Francis was at the notes reading, and Josh Zorner got to be the one who was like, Francis is really tall, and I was like, it's surprising.
I'm not insulted by that, but I had the impression of maybe I should have been insulted.
No, I don't think it's insulting. I think it's truly neutral. We sold out our event at McNally Jackson Seaport. There was a wait list. It was a really nice time. My favorite part was Josh and I talked a little bit about why iPhone notes, and then we had 3 people come and read from the book. And then I invited people to read their own note from the book if it hadn't been read, a note that they submitted to this bulletin board we had up at the event as part of the RSVP, or they could just spontaneously read something out of their phone notes. And people took us up on that. And I think like we could have even done that part for longer. I was thinking like, what if if we did this in the future, we could do a more extreme version where it was just like, you have to read if you get called on.
Oh my God. Well, because I mean, I don't know if you want to say this on pod, but there was some, teasing of a potential follow-up.
We have teased a light mode sequel. This is, this like connects with Edmond because, the big design choice. Shift. Yeah, the big design choice for the book was like, do we make it dark mode or light mode screenshots? Because Josh designed it entirely in the Notes app. We went with dark mode, but maybe we go with light mode next time.
Actually, wait, that's something I should say for when Edmond's here. What are you going to say?
Well, I remember when we were designing
he's here, by the way.
Okay. Well, let's let him in. Let him in.
Yeah.
Hey,
Edmond, what's up?
Not much. This is my first time on a proper podcast. So
wait, what's an improper podcast? Have you been on a lot of improper ones?
Twitter Spaces, I guess.
Yeah.
Or maybe Spaces, just like
I would say that's an improper podcast for sure. I'm really glad you came when you did though, because I have nothing to say about the Oscars. So you really saved me from humiliating myself.
I was about to say something about the Oscars, but you also have the honor of being the first Australian to appear on this podcast.
Oh damn! Nice.
Yeah, that's a fact.
I've met a surprisingly big amount of like Australian cultural strategists just like looking on the internet. So I don't know. Maybe there's an Australian.
How many of them live in Williamsburg?
A lot, I think.
I think it's the Australian experience to maybe look outward, and that does lend itself to cultural strategy, right?
Yeah. I mean, I guess we're also isolated on an island, so I guess we just kind of like have maybe like a outsider's perspective on a lot of things.
One thing I've noticed in your content is that you in your luxury memes is that you reference New York culture a lot, which I find fascinating. Like, I mean, when I lived on the West Coast, I looked towards New York and like was like caught in the like downward spiral, the eastward spiral, rather we could say there. But I feel like being in Australia and how many hours are you ahead of New York?
Jeez, I don't know. The times are different.
What time is it there right now?
Right now it's 8 a.m.
And it's 5 p.m. here as we record this.
We're coming to you from yesterday. Don't be freaked out.
Wow, it's March 5th. No, but my point is like you had a meme. When was this? A few weeks ago, I don't know. Where it was the NYC Downtown Influencer Podcast.
Oh yeah.
And it's like it's twisted that you have to endure this stuff being on the other side of the world.
Hey, I think it's. Yeah. Oh, sorry, you go.
I was just going to say you benefit from not being immersed in it. You could be like a true cataloger and observer of the culture and notice things and patterns that people who are immersed in it can't see because they're too close.
I think it's a bit. I mean, on one hand, that's somewhat true, but I also get roasted sometimes for being like, "You don't actually live here. Like, what do you know? Like, what are you talking about?"
It could be worse. You could live here and then be roasted for being a transplant.
True. But I think for me, like, I've always kind of like looked to New York as many people do, as kind of this place where culture is generated. So it just makes sense that, like, especially for the Anglosphere, it makes sense that it's one of the places that you kind of point towards. And then working in this kind of culture consumer crypto space, everyone is from New York basically, so you just end up absorbing a lot by osmosis. And then also my co-founder for Esoteric, one of my co-founders, Alexa, she's she's lived in New York for the past, I don't know, like 10 or 12 years, like really long time. So I absorbed a lot of it through her as well. So I think.
Wait, the last thing I want to say on New York is, I know you're visiting here in a week or two. Yeah. What are like the things that are too buzzed about? What's the character of yourself that you're going to become? What are you going to do? What are the restaurants you're going to go to?
Oh man, I'm going to get roasted so hard for this, but I feel like it's all like the memey stuff that people. So like right now, like Bridges, that new restaurant, is on the list. Dimes, but I didn't choose. Well, I chose Dimes, but because my friend wanted something like really healthy.
Gotta go once.
I've never been.
I've actually never been either. Wow. All right. Wow.
I really wanted to go to the Otter at like the new hotel, the Manor. I wanted to stay there actually, but like crazy expensive. But I didn't. Sure. What else? I want to check out all the stores, like Dev Street Market, of course. There's no like. There's no one in Australia.
Go to Venn Space.
DSM New York is great. It's great people watching. So there's a cute little cafe. Definitely worth hitting.
Yeah. I really want to check out WSA as well. But I don't know what events are running right now. There was like a tea festival in February, which looked really cool, which I really would have liked. But not sure what's going on for this month.
Ben Dietz, I think, works out of there. If you want me to ask him what's going on, or I don't know if you know him, but
Ben. Oh yeah,
you do. You pay for his newsletter. I
pay for his newsletter.
This in his newsletter.
Yeah. You should ask him. He's there. Like I think he works out of there most days. So.
Oh shit. Okay. Yeah, I didn't realize he was because I think whenever I watch his pod, I keep thinking he's in Florida, but I think that may be Jeff.
No, he's in
Greenpoint.
He's in Greenpoint, the Florida of Brooklyn. No, I'm just kidding. That's not true. Well. Francis has excellent taste in restaurants. I have okay taste. I tend to go back to places that
you're kind of like Andrew Cuomo in that you talk a lot about New York, but you don't live here.
Me?
Yeah,
me.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, both. No, but I mean, Daisy, but you live near. You live in Westchester.
I'm in the state.
Yeah,
I'm close enough. What else?
Okay, wait. Well, let's moving on from New York a bit for a moment at least. We should talk about.
Well, can I say one more thing? Well, I was just to say, like,
say it.
I've interviewed Lisa Birnbach a couple times, and like she's famous for writing the Preppy Handbook. And when she wrote it, it was like the first sort of like public disseminated like breakdown of the codes of this very sort of like insular class or somewhat insular class. And I think when I've spoken to her about it, she was like really had one foot in and one foot out, where she kind of fit the preppy mold and was surrounded by people like that. But she was also a bit of like an interloper, an observer in that world. Because she went to Brown, but she was kind of like Jewish and from New York. And so she wasn't really a WASP. And I kind of see like the memes that you do, like Edmond does, like almost like the 2025 version of that, where you're externalizing something that you're able to see because you have one foot in that world and one foot out. And I don't know. I think that's writers have always sort of done that. Good cultural critics.
It's a bit of both. I think I say this a lot, but I make fun of it because like I want to be it as well. So I think it's kind of aspirational in a sense.
You know so much about it. You know enough about it to make fun of it because you're obsessed with it, and that's
exactly.
You know so exactly.
And I think it is like people like may say like, oh, this is cringe or da 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 da. But at the end of the day, I think it's still like such a privilege, and it must be like an incredible experience to like be able to live and experience kind of that world. As much as people make fun of it. So, I mean, for me, it kind of comes from a place of like admiration.
Yeah. I mean, I think the based cringe spectrum is very similar to the earnestness irony spectrum.
It's a horseshoe.
we've addressed on this pod, yeah, is absolutely a horseshoe. So
I wanted to ask about your career arc because I've never seen somebody who has this exact arc. So from what I understand, you were in college studying law, but working as a graphic designer and art director, and then you graduate and you practice law for 4 years. You do Web3 IP, and then you switch to being a tech founder for a couple of years, and then this year you've pivoted to now you're more of like a cultural strategist consultant.
Yeah, right on the money.
Okay, so what's up with that?
So I think, like, taking it right back to the start, I always kind of had this split path mentality. I think, like, this side of me that was like, go be a serious person, get a real job, was like, go, I think it was also like, familial pressure or like self pressure as well, was like, okay, like, go be a lawyer. But then I also had this kind of creative side. And I ended up being really interested in graphic design when I was in high school. And so I was like, okay, I did an internship during my like first year of university at a small like graphic design studio, and I really loved it. And so I was like, okay, why don't we try and do both? And so I tried and do both for a while. I kind of like, did an internship, freelanced at, a small studio. I did like 3 or 4 months at an Ogilvy. And then I crashed out there, and I was like, okay, I can't. And then that's when I was like, okay, maybe traditional like advertising isn't for me. And then so I went full on into, and then I was like, okay, I went full into law because at the same time I got a clerkship. I don't know what they call it in the US. It's like a summer clerk. Yeah. So same kind of thing. And so I did that, and then I ended up kind of enjoying that a lot, enjoying the problem solving aspect of like being a lawyer. And so I was like, okay, this feels good. Because I was self-taught as a graphic designer, I think there were kind of like gaps in my knowledge that weren't there in my legal side. And I kind of think, okay, well, I'm good at this. And it's like fulfilling to walk away from the end at the end of the day, thinking, okay, I've done something, done something meaningful. But then kind of over time, I think, this interest for fashion, for culture, for all of these, for art, all of these things, it never left me. And so eventually got to a point as an, IP lawyer where I would be working on things for like cool clients, but then I would always be kind of looking over the fence, so to speak. And, I kept thinking, no, I want to be back in that world. Like from the time, I was a like privacy lawyer, like privacy tech. I was kind of a mix of things. I had a like gap where I was like thinking like, okay, I want to. I was like looking at all of these kind of data privacy things, and I was really like looking at like taste, the concept, like in my own time, and I was thinking about like, okay, why isn't there something? There's so much of these like there's so much attention being paid to protecting your privacy and your sensitive health information. But I mean, how people actually like kind of make money is off your taste and preference data. Like, why isn't that something, that you can take with you and have protected and, have control over? And that's kind of like where the jumping point for like getting into my startup. I don't want to like rabble on too much.
No, that's good. It's funny reading that or hearing that from you, because I mean, 2 weeks ago we had this person on, Jed Esper, who has this startup called or a company called Shelf, which is about like giving you a way to own that taste data and take it with you, and like make other companies plug into it, and like you have it all collected, which is like, I feel like it's very ambitious, because the reason why there's no privacy around that data is because companies make money from it, and because so much of the tech economy is so reliant on that data flowing so freely, right?
I definitely think so, and I think that's but I mean, I think now like there's no reason why like it can't be both. I think what drew me to Web3 space, and this was a kind of a good segue into it as well, is that because of the kind of like ZK proofs like mechanisms, you can like provide that access so that you can kind of have that preference data be freely have free movement of that data. while still preserving privacy and control. And I think, there's no reason why those two things can't coexist. And it was what I was kind of trying to build, but the form factor for what I was doing wasn't quite right, I think.
So tell us about Esoteric, company,
okay.
which this was like kind of, I think you're about to get into that. This is where you go after your law practicing.
This
is where you start, not where you go.
Yeah, I guess where I started. So Esoteric was basically what we were trying to do was digital profiles of your personal taste. And so, like I was mentioning before, as a privacy lawyer, we saw all of these regulations and like all of this attention being paid to protecting your financial information, protecting your health information. But none of it was actually kind of being paid to how can we actually protect your taste data, or how can somebody own and control that data? And at the same time, it seems like kind of a missed opportunity, because it's what kind of dictates a lot of your experience on the internet. And then at the same time, it's how these companies kind of make money by learning what you like and kind of reserving it back to you. So what I wanted to do was essentially create a profile of your personal taste that you own, and kind of it travels around with you. And the form that it took initially was kind of like a digital wardrobe. We wanted to center on the fashion aspect of it. But then kind of over time, it the prototype that we had turned into more of a taste social media profile. So what we had was a kind of a profile where you had each user chose 4 items to start from: music, so plugged into your Spotify, clothing, so you just pick things from an Essence API that we did, and then places, so just Google Maps, you just added 4 places, and then kind of combined to create a little card of your taste. You would get a spinning NFT of your personal taste. And the idea was that people would add things, and it would be a place for you to discover from the people around you.
Could you mint other people's taste too?
Yeah,
cool.
Exactly. So that was the idea, is that you would kind of be collecting each other's taste, and it was at once a way for you to own your own taste, but then also cut through algorithmic glut, because every person you add is a real person that is manually curating places.
Are you a perfectly imperfect app user?
I am not a user, but I do browse it.
Yeah. Do you feel like you discover cool stuff there?
Yes and no, because
or do you more do you more just develop new theories of stereotypes? It's a very delicate balance.
It's I mean I think it's very earnest. Yeah, I think it's very earnest, which I really like. And I mean, I think because there's so many categories of things that people recommend on there, I tend not to get recommendations from it, but I do like looking at it just as a way, just enjoying the vibes on there. But I don't really see it as
It's also hard when
utility.
It's geographically specific. And I think, I appreciated recently that you, I guess, I don't know if this is more of a self roast, but you did a POV, you live in Australia and are into clothes.
Oh yeah, that was me. Yeah, that was totally self-owned.
Yeah, which is great, because I'm now I'm on the other side looking at this and I'm like, oh, I don't know. I mean, I know what DHL is obviously, but I was like, oh, I don't know these brands. Now I feel like I'm getting a slice of culture.
Yeah, what's the equivalent of Essence in Australia?
Essence is the equivalent of Essence.
Oh my god! Which $70 shipping, you said, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we'll see if it's more or less from Canada to US now.
Yeah.
What do you know? What the new price?
The tariffs.
Yeah.
I haven't looked. I haven't bought anything since after the tariffs yet. So actually, this was the last thing I bought from Essence.
What is
in
it?
January? So it's a Sakai shirt.
Very nice. Sakai on here. I'm zooming in.
No logos. No logos.
Come on, that would be gauche.
Well, one of my favorite novels takes place in Australia, and I consider myself very cultured for that. I actually recommended it in my Perfectly Imperfect profile.
What's the novel?
It's called A Town Like Alice by an author named Neville Shute. His more famous novel is called I believe it's called The Beach or On the Beach, and it's about how Australia would be like the last place to get the fallout from a nuclear war. And so like everyone else on Earth is like dead, and it's just coming slow rolling to Australia, and everyone has like cyanide pills. And
so it's kind of like Mad Max.
Yeah, I guess so.
Wow, I think Australians just love the apocalypse.
Yeah. What are the vibes? What are the vibes in Sydney? I have no idea. I've never been.
I think it's very like people compare it to LA. Like actually weather-wise, geographically, I've heard comparisons to San Francisco or San Diego.
So vibes-wise, weather is what you're saying.
Yeah, it is pretty perfect for that front. I think Sydney has a lot of like God-given gifts to it. I think in terms of the vibe, very LA, I would say, like extremely, like Sydney in particular, like, you know, Bondi culture. It's very like athletic, like beachy kind of vibes. Not to say that like kind of the different vibes don't exist, but I think that's the, like when you conjure up the image of like Sydney, that's kind of what you get. Yeah. But I mean, there's still some like, you know, interesting things going on as well. Like Song for the Moon is this Australian brand that I really love as well.
I wanted to ask you, I've first found you on Twitter, your luxury memes, but your Twitter account says that you only joined in March 2021. Were you really not on there before?
He's a forensic investigator. I apologize.
No, I appreciate it. It's good research. No, I think that's true. I think I made a new account because my old one I couldn't log into. But that being said, I wasn't really active on Twitter like before then either. Like I would just kind of scroll a little bit.
So you were active, however, on LinkedIn, where your first post is from 10 years ago, and then you got another one from like 9 years ago, and then there's not really any until like 3 years ago. But we were right before you got on, we were talking about LinkedIn and how it's cringe, but also in my case, I revealed that I swore I would never make a LinkedIn, and then I did in 2018, and now it's where I have the largest following on social media, where I post the most.
His largest following on social media.
Yeah, mine. Anyways, what was I going to ask? So I noticed though, I was saying this again before you got on, that your dark mode post. So, and we should talk about dark mode and your theory here in a second. But I noticed that it got like 1,000 likes on LinkedIn and like 270 on Twitter, which like I don't know if it surprised me, because I think like yes, I associate with you with Twitter and you're a little more active there. That you've become more active on LinkedIn, but it is very like people on LinkedIn want to like are hungry for these memes that are like cultural commentary and like things they can use and like share in their Slack and say, hey, we should adjust our marketing strategy to this.
Well, vultures degree. Always are hungry. And Edmond, can I just say, I think it's bullshit that Tim Apple debuted the new iPad with a core
I saw that
screenshot and not a dark mode screenshot.
Core blimey.
Core is so 2024. Anyway.
What can you do?
Justice for Edmond.
Justice for dark mode.
Yeah.
Tell us about dark mode. Okay, dark mode. So the dark mode shift. This is one of your luxury memes riffing on a Sean Monahan of Normcore fame's boom boom aesthetic. What do these words mean for listeners who might not know?
So I think I won't go into like Sean's stuff because I think he'll do a much better job of explaining what boom boom is. But
we'll have him on at some point to defend himself.
I think so. The dark mode shift for me, I think it comes from a place of how do I couch this the best way?
Here, I'll read a quote from your original post. You say basically you say the last 15 years were about projecting cultural positivity and that this era is now ending. And now, to directly quote, you're either a supervillain ruthlessly chasing the bag, a nihilist reveling in debauchery, or not going to make it.
Yeah. So I think like, you know, for the past, I think for like a generation of people, maybe like multiple generations, actually, you know, I think for anyone that's kind of like a millennial or younger, we've kind of grown up in this like time, like since I guess like, you know, as far back as I guess the 90s, like, you know, the like Fukuyama, like end of history, where even though there have been blips in time where, you know, horrific things have happened, the overall trajectory of the Western world, has, at least kind of in a cultural sense, or social sense, has been one of progress. So, you know, increasing social liberalization, you know, people are paying more attention to the environment. You know, we see, you know, sort of like a lot of workplaces at least had the veneer of becoming, you know, seeming more empathetic, and, you know, like things are generally better than what they used to be. And so I think what the dark mode shift in my mind is that for the first time, I think a lot of people are coming to grips with the fact that we're actually kind of seeing a regression, or a meaningful regression for the first time, perhaps in our lives. And dark mode is kind of like kind of a reckoning, or a collective grappling for like what that means and what comes next. So I think in some ways it's kind of like a period of grief as well, because people are kind of adjusting to this idea of a future that is probably not going to be around for a while. So that shift to, you know, it's kind of different responses to grief, you know, whether it's anger, whether it's, you know, nihilism, whether it's just kind of like, you know, throwing caution to the wind. I think it's kind of a collective reaction to things in the West, kind of not being the status quo, not being the same that they've always been.
There's actually something that I was reading about recently, which is like the concept of ambiguous grief, which is like grief that does not have a real like end point, or there's it doesn't really go in, it's kind of like open-ended, right? Like, for example, if the grief that you experience, if somebody that you're close to has dementia and you're grieving them, a version of them while they're still alive, or a relationship that ends without like a lot of clarity, or even like you know, a layoff from a job that's handled really poorly and is not, you know, you're not really given a reason, you don't get to say goodbye to your coworkers, that's all considered like ambiguous grief. And I think that the political grief that people feel kind of falls into that category, because there's still a sense of like, well, is this just going to be a horribly ridiculous 4 years, and then, you know, there's going to be some sort of like progressive resurgence coalition that comes to, you know, recalibrate these principles? Or are we just in like decline with no endpoint in sight? And I think that ambiguity is where the nihilism comes from, because otherwise, like, grief can be like really, when it's not ambiguous, it can be empowering, in the sense that like there's something to recover from, there's something to overcome, and that can have a narrative. But when it's ambiguous, what's difficult about it, and for me where the nihilism comes in, is like there's no narrative.
It's kind of like about in a hopeless, or like a place where it's hard to find hope, a moment where it's hard to have hope for a future, your own or your broader communities, whatever. It's about like kind of by hook or by crook, creating your own hope, creating your own assurance of survival. Was like, so this is my own pet version of dark mode theory, maybe, that I've been working on, is that there's 3 tenets of culture right now that are frictionlessness, the creator/gig economies, and decentralization, specifically of meaning, but also more broadly. And I think there's probably a better word that sums up all 3 of these things, but it's about like frictionlessness is, you could see that as, I mean, that's what every tech company tries to achieve for acquisition of customers. That is sports gambling on your phone. Gig economy, creator economy is a lack of security, precarity. Decentralization of meaning is like Meta getting rid of their fact checking service for community notes. It's everything that Doge is doing in terms of like gutting federal institutions that, you know, try to create a centralized meaning, and meaning in kind of a broad sense.
I would also say like gig economy is like something characterized by humans in service of technology rather than the other way around.
Yes. And then, well, so something, Daisy, a tweet that you put on my timeline
You're welcome.
a day or two ago from Kyla Scanlon, you were quote tweeting her second tweet, but that she was replying to her first tweet, which was efficiency without humanity isn't governance. And what I was taking away from this is like efficiency. I think she's maybe referencing Doge, but I also think like the word efficiency as I see it used and in the context of companies is like what efficiency means. What people mean when they say efficiency is requiring minimal human labor for maximum profit, which means more profit for less people, which also conversely means less money for more people, which is very economics 101, perhaps. I don't know where I'm going.
Well, there's the big schism between the left and the right right now. And I mean, it's really not binary because there's like a lot of pockets within here. And I think like Kat D, who came on a couple weeks ago, makes a good point about how many like just different pockets of heterodox thinking there are, and how most of them are just entertainment and contrarianism for the sake of like audience growth. But you know, the right looks at the left and sees certain things that like a left leaning person, like including myself, would see as virtuous, like diversity, and they try to say, well, like diversity is not inherently a virtue, it's neutral, or even like, you know, depending on how racist they are, they're like it's or even bad, neutral or even bad. But like the right, especially the tech right, efficiency and innovation to them, which to me these are truly neutral. Innovation can be good, it can be bad. Efficiency can be good, it can be bad. They see it as inherently virtuous. And the reason why I responded so positively to this Kyla Scanlon tweet is like literally like the day before I was like, oh my God, like they think that the purpose of government is to innovate, which is so far, or they're trying to like reconstruct the government almost like this like messed up ship of Theseus to be an innovation machine. But like, to me, the purpose of government is to maximize the common good. Yeah. And I think most of the founding fathers would agree. And so you have to maximize the common good, and innovation is downstream of that. But
this is something that Mike Pepe, when we spoke to him, that he spoke about, and really that he read about in his book, where like institutions are about the social good, and that's the incentive. Whereas platforms, the incentive is pure profit. And the incentive of an institution is supposed to be pro-social, not profit. And that's why like people tweeting about, you know, the USPS is this, like, why do we have the what Jason Calsanis or whatever tweeting about, like, why do we have the USPS? It's not profitable. It's like, I don't want it.
Which, by the way, is doing the last leg of
delivery for
Amazon.
Yeah.
Sorry, Edmond, we like popped off at you. The last thing I'll say is like, I'm interested in your opinion on this because you're more immersed in Web3. I'm sort of immersed in it. Francis, you're not. But like,
not at all.
The most recent big Web3 conference was ETH Denver, which is like people who are building on Ethereum and adjacent to Ethereum coalescing in Denver, whatever, for this conference. And the vibe was like off, apparently, from the tweets that I'm seeing. The vibes are off. And this is coming in the midst of a regulatory environment that is more friendly to cryptocurrency than has ever been in the past. And like, not just cryptocurrency, like meme coins, alternative assets, literally any form of blockchain-backed financialization is like, it's, you know, open season, whatever.
This is dark mode shift.
Dark mode shift. But what's so dark mode about it is like, a lot of these people got exactly what they wanted. And they're furious. And I think that's like the inherent paradox and trap of dark mode. It's like the nihilism isn't just people who are like, you know, I really would have liked to live in a country with universal healthcare. It's the people who got exactly what they wanted, also experiencing this ambiguous grief for some reason. And like, I'm curious, like how obviously this is dark mode. There's a starter pack meme for it, but like, how does kind of the longer form version of this account for that paradox?
I mean, I think with the people that have kind of just voted for something or like, you know, had something and then like, I mean, it really comes down to the fact that maybe they've just let one part of themselves or like one desire kind of overtake the rest of them. And then so, you know, even though they have got that goal, whatever, you know, like let's say like deregulation of, or like, you know, lack thereof of regulation of crypto, like that, you know, might not sit well with the rest of the, you know, like a lot of people have, you know, like I presume, like, you know, have voted for Trump just because they want to secure the bag. I think, you know, maybe it's like some sort of like, you know, I would say like maybe internal guilt or something that's catching up with them.
And they've also, like, in a sense, lost the narrative too. Like they don't have that narrative because the narrative for so long was like, I could be so great if the regulatory environment would allow, like if everyone would just get out of my way, I would be rich. And like losing that narrative and actually having to like explain, oh, like why did the coin just not automatically go up, or like why are people not using my app? I think some of the grief is like the loss of that underdog narrative too, of like, wow, you know, I always say like people, like I said right after the election, a lot of people are about to realize that being in power is super embarrassing. You know, it's cool to be the underdog. It's not cool to be in power and fucking it up.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think, you know, a lot of people are, you know, I mean, turns out it hasn't been so great for them either. So I think people are like you say, are just, you know, kind of grappling with that, and they have like, okay, so if all of the stuff that I wanted is happening, but I'm still not rich or I'm still not happy, then like, you know, what else is there?
Who's left to blame? Cardano?
Yeah, who's left to blame?
It's really easy to tell people how to drive from the back seat, but when you make the transition from backseat driver to actual driver, you are much more exposed.
It sort of reminds me, I finally watched American Psycho recently, like literally in the last month, had never seen it. And I would say like American Psycho is sort of like dark mode of the 80s or 90s.
Because the yuppie era was its own dark mode.
Oh my God, he loves bringing up yuppies. But that
Well, 7 months ago, whenever I read that book, A Triumph of the Yuppies.
And Lord, I wish you never had.
They talk about the preppy handbook in there a lot, and I stopped myself from bringing it up earlier.
Okay, well, thank you for your service.
But now that glass is broken.
Well, so like similar to you, like experiencing New York kind of by osmosis at a distance. That's how I had always experienced American Psycho. So I had this idea of like what was going to be in the movie. And most of the movie did conform to what I thought it was about. But I was shocked by how insecure the character is. Nobody talks about how insecure he is. But that's basically what the entire film is about. Yeah, he has everything, but he's so miserable and so insecure and looking over his shoulder to see who has more. And I realized that like people who have sort of like canonized him as like this figure of like this dark mode yuppie figure. Hero. Yeah. Like they've completely, I would say they misunderstood the text, because he's just like, okay, this is a man that like hates himself. And it's kind of, and he's embarrassing. Like he's unhinged. He doesn't like every social interaction he's in, people don't even remember him or want to talk to him. So, I mean, I guess if you're like a really maladjusted individual, your takeaway could be like, well, he still has money and the ability to like sleep with and murder women, but it's not aspirational. And people have tried to like force it into being aspirational. And I think that's like that is part of the dark mode paradox as well, that it's all about nakedly chasing power and money, but any sense of like the catharsis of aspiration and achievement is completely removed.
No, I completely agree with that. I think like it's people have a tendency to kind of like canonize these types of figures, like, you know, Patrick Bateman or you know, like Jordan Belfort. Yeah, exactly, Wolf of Wall Street. And kind of like, you know,
Belfort is at least like kind of charming though, right? Like like he's like, Bateman is so charmless.
Yeah. But I think like people just see that, and they just want to like, they only see the material side of things without kind of like thinking more deeply about the like, you know, the emotional consequences of living like that. It's interesting to me though that I guess even though like yuppiedom has changed in the way that it appears, like of course you still have like the finance bros, but now you have like the new, you know, like creative class yuppies, like,
and this is what your memes are about.
Yeah, basically. But they still experience the same level of like insecurity, and because I think otherwise, like, why would all these like accounts exist where all like people are constantly also looking over their shoulder to be like, oh, like, I discovered this place before this person, or like, oh, like, this is cringe, that's not cringe. Once it appears on a meme page, it's rinsed, so I can't wear that anymore. I think it's a lot of the same insecurities, like, that are ringing in their head. I was actually, like, interestingly, I think, have either of you read Less Than Zero? I think it's Bret Easton Ellis's first novel.
No, I haven't, but I did see that you included it in one of your recent memes. But I've not read it. I've actually never read a Bret Easton Ellis book.
I read The Shard because I heard it's because I heard it's like
Shards.
Thank you. I heard it's really good, and then I realized it's really long, and I was like, can't do this right now. But I'm looking forward to picking it back up.
Yeah. But I think, like, actually, interestingly, even though I think Less Than Zero is a lot more about that kind of like languid, like listless, numb feeling of the like, the wealthy yuppies as well, of like, the upper class as well. And I wonder whether maybe, like, this is just an offhand thought, whether maybe like these people, once they have like reckoned with their lack of a win, are going to just kind of like go through a period of anger, but then kind of linger in this
acceptance
kind of languid state.
Grief.
Yeah.
Is that what dark mode is? Like, I think that the dark mode shift is inherently a temporary thing that probably, maybe hopefully lasts less than like the 15 years that you had labeled like the previous period of optimism as lasting. Because I think the dark mode shift, I'm gonna use the word accelerationism here, though probably not in like the way it actually means. But I think the dark mode shift is a momentary acceleration that has to collapse on itself because it is this moment of antisocial behavior and of like the shameless bag grabbing and like the rugging and stuff, right? Like this, it can only last so long until people who are on the losing end of it reach a breaking point, whatever that means, whether that just means like people in the next election, like, a more like pro-social message sweeping and like so many people enforcing, like, not that it's just about politics, but I don't know. That's I guess it's a question, is like, do we think dark mode is something that like collapses on itself quickly?
True dark mode has never been tried.
Yeah, true dark mode has never. Well, maybe like in the like ancient history,
Middle Ages,
like Crusades.
That's
true. Dark Ages, literal dark ages. I'm in two minds about this. Like, on one hand, I think the like big periods of darkness are not are not like a new thing. Like, they of course like happen through history. Like we think about like wars. We think about I suppose like the like economic decline, like oil crisis in the 70s. So like there are times when like this kind of pessimism like persists for a long time. But I think, to your point about accelerationism, I do think that perhaps because things happen at a much more accelerated rate now, like events seem to like cycle through much faster, that it will become temporary, albeit like it will shift much faster because of the fact that we're in a much more hyper accelerated state. Or at least I'm hopeful that we get out of it faster.
Yeah
Yeah,
we have to hope.
Ed, is dirt for yuppies? Be honest, you're not going to hurt my feelings.
Like a little bit, yeah, I would say
Marked
so.
safe
like,
from starter packs, though. I can't tell if you don't put me in because I don't fit, or you just afraid of me a little bit.
I'm afraid of you a little bit, not gonna lie.
Good, let's keep it that way.
Let's keep it that way. But I think I put dirt in a meme once. I think it was in that I did an iceberg meme before the taste discourse.
Oh, I liked that, actually.
Yeah.
Well, I said we should do a separate one for hot people.
Oh yeah.
I DM'd you to tell you that.
Yeah.
Well, taste. I've been in meetings all day, not even like trying to be like as like a
that's
flex.
Pretty yuppie of you.
I was in meetings all day, so I opened Twitter briefly and saw some taste discourse bubbling up and was like, no, not today.
No, I'm not doing it. But see, like, again, like, it may be for yuppies, but like, I like mock things because, like, to be honest, like, hey, I spent 4 years as a lawyer, like, so coming into this space, being able to have these conversations is like aspirational for me. Like, other people think it's like, oh, you guys are like, cultural strategists, like, what do you do? Like, that's not even real. And I'm like, don't care. It's much more fun than what I was doing before.
The call is coming from inside the boutique.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you want people to stop using the word taste, or do you just think that they're misusing it?
I think it's just being used so much that it's kind of lost its meaning.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when you hear a word like repeated 10 times over and then it just becomes like noise. I think also, like, we spent a year basically talking about taste, and I don't think really the conversation has moved further.
And I think when you say that we've spent a year talking about taste, you're talking about like people on Twitter who like are cultural strategists or tech people and marketers have been talking about taste. I mean, this fucking podcast is called Tasteland.
Huge
Daisy wrote the Taste Economy piece.
But I wrote that in 2023.
You did. You were early to it, and now it's become overused.
We're so back and so over.
Well, wait, so you, a month ago, you tweeted this, and it was a joke, but it's a list. 6 words that I'm canceling this year. Phrases, more accurately: vibe, taste, world building, intersection of X and Y, culture used amorphously, and curation. So I think we have used 5 of these. No, we've used 5 of these on the pod today.
What are people at the intersection of art and tech supposed to talk about? Make that 6, bitch.
Okay, if you had to stop using 3 of those, just as a thought exercise, if you could never use 3 of those phrases again, which would you choose to abandon?
So it's definitely not going to be vibes, because I use vibes way too much, and it's just become my like de facto response, and not that.
Isn't vibe in your handle or no?
Nostalgia Express is his handle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Okay. I think intersection of art and technology, I think definitely that goes in the never use pile. I hate it.
Yeah, that's easy to abandon too.
Yeah. Culture used amorphously. No, I'm going to keep that one. I think world building, I think we could ditch, because I think it's another thing that's kind of like amorphous and like.
So then you've got curation,
things more specifically.
Curation and taste are the final 2. You have to get rid of one of those.
Final bosses.
I would. That's hard, actually. Ironic, because I'm like said I wouldn't use either. I think maybe I would get rid of taste. I mean, because it's just so. I mean, I understand like the point of it is that just to describe someone's like personal sensibilities, but I think there's so many different ways you can kind of be more specific rather than saying the word taste. Yeah. And I think, I'd rather somebody say something more specifically around, like, unless you're describing something with taste, like as in like a more like colloquial setting, for example, saying like, oh, I don't know what your taste in clothing is. Like, that's fine. But using taste as this high, like, highbrow concept, I think is really kind of
taste used amorphously.
Yeah, taste used amorphously. I'm not.
Well, it just doesn't make sense to discuss if you're not talking about active things like curation. Like, what is the actual distribution mechanism for somebody's taste? Like, where and when are you signaling it to whom? So I understand why people get frustrated, because if you're not talking about those mechanics or like kind of the who, what, where, when, why of how it's disseminated, then you're not really talking about anything substantial.
Exactly.
It's like you can't see the inside of somebody else's brain. And actually, like, the taste that you can see, like, I mean, the iceberg metaphor is interesting. Like, the taste that you can see is only such a small slice of the experience of how somebody experiences art. Like, I think we've talked about that before on this podcast.
Like revealed preferences versus
projected. Josh
Mm-hmm.
Citarella was talking about like how like I'm trying to remember the word that he used. Like this idea that people can use AI to self-insert into literature and then they'll have like basically a deeper experience of it, misunderstands that like all literature is a self insert because of the way that we read and like the way that we experience a painting. Like if you and I stand next to the same painting at MoMA and I ask you what you think of it, I'm really only getting a very small slice of your actual experience of that thing, which is what you're able to articulate. So much you
can really communicate.
Yeah, and taste is the same way. And I think like the part that can't be articulated, which is like attention, memory, the emotional somatic experience in the body, is the real thing that AI can't replicate. The public taste signaling AI could get pretty good at. And all of that nuance is missed in the way that like VCs talk about taste. And I know other people, and sometimes me.
Wait, I wanted to define. So another one I wanted to define, Edmond, I'm asking you this, is luxury. How do you define luxury?
I was like thinking about this the other day. I mean, when it comes down to it, I always kind of go back to like the like Veblen's like definition of just like,
so classic for a reason.
Yeah. I mean, it's like status signaling. It's like, you know, there's a point of which I think, you know, consumption is about just like kind of displaying status or signaling, you know, abundance. And I think what is defined as abundance has changed over the years. But I think at the end of the day, like, you know, luxury is like, you know, there's components to it, like, you know, like extreme quality, you know, exclusivity. But in terms of a social like function, it's always been about status signaling. So that's how I would define it. Or like, you know, status signaling, and then there's you know, there's a feeling of you know, like abundance and excess about it. So like I did this luxury pyramid, like, you know,
that was a really
little while ago.
Yeah.
Thank you. And you know, at the top of the pyramid was like having kids and being cool. And like, I think really that kind of speaks to it, because having children should not, you know, be a luxury, yet having multiple kids in like a city like, you know, in Sydney or New York has become like a luxury status symbol, because, you know, at once it shows that you have like, you know, economic capacity to provide. And it's also like, it's also kind of excessive in a way, because I mean, like the population is, you know, the global population is like what, 7 billion now. So in some ways it is kind of an indulgence as well. You know, not to say that people shouldn't have kids, but
I mean, the birth rate is falling.
Yeah.
Ed, I think you should make a yuppie pilgrimage to Balthazar when you're in New York. That's
it's already on the list.
Perfect. Well, and Balthazar is really like, what I like about that is at one point in time, it would have been in a starter pack for a certain type of person, but it's almost just like it's like not post cringe, but it's just
canonized classic. You know?
Exactly. I think
Never been I've never eaten at a Keith McNally restaurant. Period.
That's crazy, but really actually a true flex. We might need to unpack that on a future episode. I honestly think like you might get contacted to write an article about this for Eater by one of our.
I can.
Listeners.
Well, you could contract me for Dirt to write a review of his upcoming autobiography, and then as part of that, after I read it, I can go to his restaurant, and that can be part of the review.
Yeah, I think you should have to go to all of them, but like in a really compressed amount of time,
like in one day.
I
always wanted to.
Yeah.
What you say?
Like I've been to Balthazar a couple times.
Oh,
but
never mind then.
I wanted to compare, like, well, not compare, but I'm like always like interested, like, what is the difference between like Balthazar and Pastis? Like, it seems like the same kind of place to me.
Vibes. If we're allowed to say it, I'm going to say it. I think I've been to Minetta Tavern. I've been to Odeon. I haven't been to all of them.
It's like for me, when I lived in New Orleans, I didn't go to any of the classic, famous New Orleans restaurants, because it's like you know, I'll go eventually, like Café du Monde, you know, which is famous for the beignets. I only went like 2 weeks before I moved away.
What's the Bananas Foster place?
I don't know. There's probably a few, but I think the point is, it's in the same way as I've discussed on this podcast before. I've never read a Vonnegut novel, because I get that I didn't in high school when you're supposed to, and I get that I like it. I haven't watched Twin Peaks because I get that, like, I don't know, maybe it's some addiction to seeking out the new.
Brennan's,
which I've been trying to
go to
kill that
Brennan's?
myself. Brennan's, no, I've not been to Brennan's. No, I didn't go to any of the classic spots. I went to, I don't know.
Did you go to Hank's? That's my classic spot.
Yeah. We've talked about that.
I have a shirt and a hat.
Yeah, I know.
Have you been to New Orleans, Ed?
No, I haven't.
Oh man, that's the next.
That's
the next trip.
It's Mardi Gras there as we record today.
I know. I forgot. I usually order a king cake, and I forgot.
Yeah.
It's been Sydney Mardi Gras as well, actually.
They do Mardi Gras.
It's already.
Mardi Gras was
a
yesterday.
day ago.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Well, this is a good place to end. I feel like
let's end it here.
We got into a lot. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope that we didn't overwhelm you.
No, not at all. I hope I provided some decent chats.
Absolutely.
You surely
this was fun.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Thank you, listeners. We will see you next week.